Okay, hi. Welcome to week 15. Woo! The culmination of your water houses. I'm about halfway through, maybe a bit better, working my way through the stuff, so I'll walk you through it. And then I want to recap on the photo diaries and basically the overall experience of the water houses together. But that's what the water element story part of this book is all about anyway. And so we go back to Scorpius, Cancer, and Pisces. Scorpius, the constellation, I tend toward that, but Scorpio, of course. And so, whew, holy shit. That's all I can say. Now, it's only 3 pages, right? This one, this one, this one. And I've gone through them enough to decide whether or not there's anything I feel for now that I should have added to them, but I feel like it's strong enough for now. My photo diary for Pisces ended up being 15 pages long. It ended up being just like we got the prediction that I followed from the one reader on YouTube. I'll go back and I'll show that. But look at the bigger picture for the month, and 12th house, I don't think there is a bigger picture than 12th house. So I believe I have everything. I have all my territory that all my soul contracts cover, that my life covers. I've got it all laid out in that photo diary, and I'll get to that at the end. But in terms of pulling Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces together, my goodness, the cruise ship is the cruise ship. They totally led me completely I was following the right direction when we came up with the submarine for Scorpio, the houseboat for Cancer, and the cruise ship for Pisces. And so, and a huge event this past Saturday between me and the person that one of my clients, who's a cleaning client, not an astrology client, who's connected me to this end of the world. I'm in Manitoba, to my Paul Gallico Poseidon Adventure guidance, soul, spirit guidance. I ended up in a relationship for a while with a guy who was friends with one of Paul Gallico's sons for a long time, and who is a huge fan of Paul Gallico as a sports writer. And the guy I was with is a semi-retired blacklisted sports broadcaster who's been writing a novel. We've been in each other's novels for years, even before we met each other. So huge, and that's why I've created a website to document the story behind the stories. So there was Carol Lindley. Carol Lindley was in, she's a very major player in my life at this point as a guide, unexpectedly, but she was in Poseidon Adventure, and very important person to my client, and she made an appearance, so to speak, on the weekend. So totally threw me for a loop. So an incredible ending to the Pisces cruise ship experience, and I'll elaborate on that at some point. So with this page, the breaking it down into sort of working on not summary so much as like, I don't want to just recap thoughts from previous pages. I'm sitting with these pages, and I'm thinking and waiting for intuition to hit, waiting for little psychic messages to hit, right? What they want me to pull away from and articulate in a new way that I haven't yet, or something more that they want me to know, right? Just like in a reading. So my hidden or stolen powers, sexual interests and issues, secrets and privacy issues, necessary transformations for, Scorpio. And then, and it's a hold steady energy. I put it as hold steady because I put it fixed. What does it mean to be fixed energy? And it means standing your ground. And that's why I have very easy time re-establishing Libra as fixed energy rather than cardinal, because of that balance that Libra represents. But anyway, and we're coming up for Libra. We're coming up next. The next house we do is 7th house. We're heading straight to Libra's house. But in cardinal water, in Cancer, helpful roots and family. Well, holy shit, the Pisces photo diary totally helped me solve what emotionally was difficult necessarily to articulate while we were in 4th house. Hurtful roots and family, and it ends up being that everybody who's even been hurtful, I don't want to say this is true for anybody who's been abused, that it's been helpful, okay? That's not where I'm going with this. In terms of what you get from tools that you pull out of triggers and trauma, right? That's credit to you for what you do to get what you can from horrific, possibly horrific experiences. So, this is very, like I said in the last video, it's difficult to write about specific people. There are a few that I'm going to have to be specific about because of the religious, because of the spiritual work that they did, that they do, that they put into the world, and that it seems to be brought to me as the next generation to basically answer for. They gave me something to answer for. Ancestral and spirit guides. I'm getting there. I've your place of origin and return, and I'm finding, for me, I came up with kind of a multi-leveled answer to that. Physical and, well, physical on this earth, physical in the multiverse, and then even, you know, mental. Mutable water. House number 12. Team up. This is, I'm going to be spending, I need a bit more time figuring out what exactly I know one major part, well, let's see. My best friend and I, Tracy and I, in all of this, there were so many justice issues that came to me in 12th house because that's where my 12th house is placed, strong Libra placements, that she and I restarted our one of our planned nonprofits, and rebooted. There's an investigation into a 14-year-old's death, murder, sacrifice in Belfast, Noah Donahue, and I found stuff connected to that. And then I'm going to go back to helping Tony Lovell with the cover-up of the Met Police killing her adult son, Ambrose G. Ball, back in 2015, and then all the lies. So there's several major cases. Tracy and I, well, I helped a little bit. I helped Tracy make history in the High Court in Belfast last week. And so, and I've uncovered, as part of helping her with her case against Northern Ireland Housing Executive, I found the problems that they've had. They've screwed over at least 5 trade unions. And they've got connections to Jerry Adams, and she's already been in a fight with Jerry Adams. So, and she's a key witness in the botched inquest into the Birmingham 6 injustice, which is tied, of course, it's part of the Guildford 4, if you've watched In the Name of the Father, and that's what got me started on so much of my path way back when that came out. So, we've got several major cases pulling together, and it will, of course, tie to the potentially to further evidence is being pushed by some gang stalkers about Sloan Bella's son Keith, about his death. So on the side, even though I've distanced myself from her, I have those to follow up on. So there's, I would say it's looking like at least 14 deaths or so to be resolved. And I'll hold off from saying just how high up the Noah Donahue's case goes, out of respect for what his mom needs to know first. But it will connect to everything that's happening to and about the children, the mass graves that are being unearthed over where I live in Canada. Well, let's say Canada. Today is Canada Day, and we need to lose that name. I'm all for that kind of restructuring, but I fear that it's a controlled restructuring, and I don't even fear it. I just know it. So I would like it to be an organic restructuring, but it's not. So that has everything to do with pulling all of these houses together. So whatever, this is not small work that you're doing. I hope that you're feeling completely satisfied, blown away possibly by what is accomplished here. But again, it's not as simple as just coming up with sort of, well, but you'll know how much this either succeeded in pushing you to get very intuitive answers, or you're stuck. So what I would say for my my hidden powers, it took a while to find out. I didn't necessarily just all find it out while we were in 8th house. I probably found some of it out while we were in 4th and 12th. But so I would say psychic collaborations with spirit guides in multiple disciplines. It took me a long time to step into that. It took me, and at varying degrees, varying stages, yes, years. Some things happen faster, some things happen slower. Some things took 42 years. The ability to earn enough to be independent, free, successful. Yes, definitely had people interfering with that all along, because I needed to be in certain places at certain times. If I succeeded in ways that would have interfered with being where I needed to be, especially with the creation and birth of my child and the things that he needs, then it would have thrown everything off. And I have to believe that. I would not have my son. But then there's his story, right? So then a hidden stolen power was my spin on things, like knowing what I think about things, everything. And so again, in the spin, they put that in my head, and I understand, and spiders and spinning, and losing my spider, my pink spider when I was 2, the painting of it, that they got me to paint one and then took it away and made it an obsession for me, right? A compulsion to solve that, to try to get it back. Sexual interest and issues are... Okay, pause to let the neighbors... They were in the hallway. It seemed loud for behind a door, so no, they were just... I went and had a look. They were down the hallway. Gave them 10 minutes to finish up their chat. Okay, so I cut off right before I got into the juicy sexual interest and issues. I won't, and I don't have everything filled in anyway, but artistic and propagandist exhibitionism, because I'm Scorpio, right? And that's been with me. I came into the world that way. No, I was not wanting any attention from pedos, and I think by and large, well, in truth, the pediatrician who birthed me, I believe later went to prison for, yeah. No, I'm trying to remember. No, I gotta get it straight before I put out the accusations. I believed for a long time that the pediatrician that birthed me was convicted of pedosadism, and then I repeated it to my dad maybe within the last year, and he's like, no, that wasn't it. I'm like, well, it's a thing to believe it for a long time. And then I did have, when I was 5, I had an incident with the doctor, who got me to do something that he should not have got me to do. But, and so there was confusion between some events and whether or not I was manifesting the trauma into sexual fixations. And then, later on, as an adult, I find out I'm a Scorpio, and it's like, okay, so you have the problem of your innate personality traits because of your chart, your astrological chart, and if you don't come into the world knowing and being raised with astrology seriously, and how many of us are brought into the world that way, then you don't know that it's part of your characteristics, it's part of your traits, and so you can be coping with it, try and cope with it psychologically, and perhaps even with chemicals and stuff to modify whatever, right? Behavior modification. Not that all isn't useful, but if it's astrological, it's astrological. There's only one way to make your peace with it and come to grips with it. So for me, I'm writing a sex comedy novel series. I've in my drawing history, lots of work with nudity, and making philosophical points through it. But again, just enjoying life. A lot of my guides are very oriented towards using sexual imagery positively, including pornography. That's empowering, not not the pornography that's there to exploit. But that's there's every industry. Let's see, clothing design. But I can only do it for pleasure if I'm in love. Otherwise, so I can only do it in my real life if I'm in love and actively, like in a happy relationship, or in a well, it doesn't always have to be happy, but if there's someone to do it for. Otherwise, I do it as a creative product. But I even struggle to do it as professionally as a product. And I don't mean that I'm creating just straight up adult content. I mean writing, drawing, comedy, anything where I have to feel strong about myself in that. It's very hard to do that if I'm suffering defeat in love. But secrets and privacy issues, people, and again, the point is that not just that these are aspects, but that these come to the fore, that these become basically deciding factors in life. Yeah. People like to use me behind closed doors. Partners like to keep me secret. So no more partners. Extreme careful timing and trust with crime and client evidence and information. So, and that is a primary aspect of my life. It used to be that I kept people's secrets as a babysitter. That, all the crap that goes on behind closed doors amongst couples and stuff like that. It's like being a sin eater, right? And so the idea of how to take that energy that we're born into, that is used against us, yes, and then to turn it around. So necessary transformations. Solitude. I needed to become okay and not so triggered by being alone. There's very strong abandonment sensations with solitude when it would come. I am good at being alone, but I never end up alone when I want to be alone. I end up being left all the time, and it's like, but I didn't want it this way. And so there was the balancing of like working through all of this level of self-awareness and relationships and stuff. So who do I trust? I have this very small circle at this point because I can only manage a small circle. And with what they've given me to do anyway. I do have a lot of people in my life and I have a lot of things to answer for. But but managing successfully people to care for, even on one hand. I trust everyone to be themselves. I trust all the assholes to be assholes. I trust everybody to be fairly consistent. So it's like a trust that allows for everything. But I have to transform from victim and being targeted, that's what I had to transform from, to being myself. Not the opposite of victim. What is the opposite of victim? It's not persecutor. It's being yourself. It's being your whole self. Yes. And what's the opposite of being? Well, what the opposite of being targeted is to target, but to target who and what? Yes. But that's the main transformation there for me. So I'm going to work similarly through the issues of Cancer, House 4 and House 12. There's a question of how have they been helpful? Have family members been helpful knowingly or unknowingly, right? And so then that'll take me to some missionaries that are related to me that were actually, they gave me a place to stay on the very important journey that I had, the destined journey of going to Prince Edward Island. They lived in the Toronto area and I would stay with them and they would take very good care of me. But they were also missionaries in Nigeria. They were part of the very, I've only resolved it for this. I've only resolved it for the photo diary at this point. I knew about 10 years ago that I was working with, shall we say, ancestral guides. but maybe they're not deities. They don't want to be known as deities, but they're God's helpers, the Orisha. I didn't know them by name. I didn't know they were Orisha. But when it came time this past year to get specific in knowledge and research, and then I came across the Orisha, I was like, wait a minute, but that's the best. Yes, that's matching who I've worked with, who's worked with me for years. And then I was like, well, but where do they come from? Okay, they're from the Yoruba. But where are they? Well, I thought the Yoruba, and I had studied Africa with my son while I was homeschooling him. I was like, well, okay, I know it's okay. So they're in Nigeria, but I thought my cousins were missionaries, and my cousins are my dad's cousins. So my dad's just a bit older than my dad. They're in their 80s, 90s. And I thought they were in Niger, but I was like, well, then how much? And they would bring literature back to me, right? So it's not that they brought the Orisha to me, but then when I looked them up, and I've got them, they're documented as part of. They were with Sudan Interior Mission, and we don't want. Well, we do. We have to go down what Sudan Interior Mission is tied to with the multinationals, right? And they went in, and the two peoples that they targeted specifically were the Hausa and the Yoruba. So we come full circle. So did they intend to help me by bringing me into close contact with the Yoruba? No, they intended to convert Yoruba to Christianity. And we'll put quotation marks around that. And what they were really doing was paving the way. Now, how much do they know they were paving the way? Now, they actually want to meet with me this summer, so it's going to be interesting. But ancestral and spirit guides, got that more than covered. But of course, I'll spell it all out. Place of origin and return. Again, and I've already read through that. Okay, so that's that page. So by the time I'm done this, I think I've laid it out for myself in a way that I don't have to solve again. This is going to be difficult with the musings, the dreams and fantasies, spiritual expectations on me I'm fairly clear about. My spiritual expectations I'm less clear about. I'm fairly certain about my free will and soul contract, right? But once I've got that laid out, once I've got that written out, we draw a line under it, right? It's going to be very fascinating to see how much clarity one person can have about themselves. And then what comes of it. Because once you're clear on it, you can release it and step into being more and more less needing to be so self-aware, right? Because you're healed, yeah? Now, powers, conscience, and commitments. Powers I put as progress because now we're matching up with the 8, the 4, and the 12. So the 8 of progress, proving yourself to yourself. The 4 of stability, yes. Possible boredom, the sandbox that you get yourself into. Whether or not it's the right sandbox. And then the 12, which converts to a 3 of the manifestations, yes. And all to determine exactly what gifts, because altogether they equal a 6. Right? So spiritual gifts or any kind of gifts that have been given to you, but primarily spiritual ones, yes? Let's see, are we still... Yeah, good, we're still recording. So how can the planets, signs, and seasons in your 8th house be used to your advantage? I also looked at current transits. When I'm in my 8th house, Mars has entered Cancer, and Mars went and disappeared in Cancer in the beehive cluster, right? Very interesting, like out of visible range, right? So... very interesting that we studied the beehive cluster in particular just the last month in Cancer, and how much interest there is around the whole constellation of Cancer and the double meanings and the triple meanings and the nebula, the course, the mass inside the breast of Cancer, right? Which is such an interesting parallel, shall we say. I've covered that. If we go back to the video where we covered that, then I get into that in more detail. But looking also, so yeah, looking at the transits, the sun enters Gemini when I'm in my 8th house, and I have Jupiter in my 8th house happens during Gemini. So I've got the sun, the instincts and triggers are hitting this Gemini as I'm in it in my 8th house. There's a super moon. It'll either be in Sagittarius or a full moon in Sagittarius. The strawberry moon will happen during my 8th house in Sagittarius or Capricorn. That's right. Mercury and Venus will be mostly in Gemini. So there's a lot of alignment in Gemini, and I have my Jupiter in Gemini, and my 8th house is strongly in Gemini. Gemini and Cancer. So, and then I'm looking at the dates of going through June, July, and August, and into September a bit, with both placements of my 8th house, right? The whole house placement and the Ibn Ezra, so the combined placements. And I do believe that both systems need to be taken into more and more. I believe that that there's like auras. There's just the same as we need tropical and sidereal together, because there's the aura of the season that comes ahead of the sidereal placement. Yeah. Sidereal meaning star. So I'm looking at Knight of Cups energy, Knight of Cups actions, Knight of Cups concerns, because I put Scorpio as Knight of Cups fixed. Now let's see, I also have my North Node and Pluto in Virgo. Because we go into September a bit, it touches on Virgo. So my North Node and my Pluto affect, of course, because Pluto co-rules the 8th, right? And then I noticed a quincunx in my chart. I have 2 of them, and that's where you have, it's basically my initial K, right? You have a V and a straight line, right? And you've got 5 points. You've got 4 points of a rectangle, and then the center point. Yes. And apparently that matters tremendously in medical astrology, but I have 2 of those basically in my chart. And one of them starts with the 8th house. So I have to figure out what that means. But also, right in the smack dab middle of that, we hit the Lion's Gate portal, the 8-8. And so my 8th house on the 8th of the 8th, right? So triple strength. And that reminded me that my contractions for my child were triple strength. And he's a Leo rising. So how can my Jupiter aligns with the strawberry supermoon, okay? And if the strawberry supermoon, or if the strawberry full moon, it might not always be a supermoon, but if it's in Sagittarius, it should typically be in Sagittarius, so then ruled by Jupiter. So we've got tremendous advantages here. I've got so much Gemini lining up, and so much Sagittarius Jupiter lining up, and then of course Gemini being straight across from Sagittarius, that that should be a tremendous amount of information processed, a tremendous amount of truth processed, like something between me and guides and people. Now the question about being able to communicate it effectively is a whole other thing. Then I looked at Mars. Because Mars is in my 8th, I painted my first pink spider. Lilith, 13 years of not painting or expressing or drawing. Saturn, I became my own mother. In those cycles, did what I needed to do to look after myself. I cared for me. And Jupiter, major Sagittarius events and energy. So I'm looking at those things together to look for the advantage. Have I quite found the advantages yet? I'm still kind of hovering around them, and I feel like I'll need to get through the rest of these too. So I've done the same thing. I won't read it through it all because you don't need me to. You've got your own stuff going on with yours. But just the same as I did with that. And again, keeping out for the moon, which moons are hitting in current time when you go through those houses. And any other events, right? So the goal being figuring out where the progress is, where the stability is, and where the partnerships are. And, partnerships like multiple, and I have planets in all of these, so I don't have, I'm just carrying on my notes past that, because I don't need to leave blank space. And then this seemed like possibly a throwaway thought experiment, but I'm not focusing on coming up with a visualization, I'm coming up with a diagnostic. So if you combined all the houses of the signs in your 8th house, what kind of new house would you have to design? All right, and the primary quality of that house would be less personal space, more communal space. So fewer personal needs. The house comes first. The function of the house comes first, based on the fact that in my 8th house, I'd have to combine a submarine with a penthouse, a houseboat, a spaceship, and a lighthouse. So something fully mobile in water, submersible, protected from enemy, fire, able to convert from heavy water to heavy space conditions, spectacular in design and occasionally regularly on display or visible, with media coverage on all platforms, because that's what Gemini would want, right? The penthouse. Able to pass through the Van Allen belts, always staying near enough to oxygen resupply, food resupply. Would there be water purification on board? Several safe harbors for surfacing and anchoring. Friendly, trusted network. Patrolling the perimeter of the environment, right? Because it's got to be mobile, but at the same time, it's got to do what that lighthouse, what that Virgo lighthouse does, right? To be a beacon. So dimensions, environment, dimensions, patrolling them. Regular beacon transmissions. And then yes, room prioritized for, you need the crew, right? You need other people's concerns. So very much my 8th house across the board has to allow for other people's concerns, but also look really good and be very defensible. But yeah, it's so the point of that being, what energy, what are the realistic expectations for me in 8th house, in my 8th house? What are the realistic expectations of the time spent in there, how my time is going to be used by the universe, by other people, what I can expect for interferences, or how to go with the flow. This is what you want to set yourself up for success so you can optimize your time. And if it means making a lot of allowances for other people's needs during that time, then how to conserve energy, how to work with your metabolism, how to work with, like what kind of energy do you bring to Scorpio concerns? What kind, because if you're not strong Scorpio, then how do you acclimatize? Yes. So they'll do the same thing for Cancer and for Pisces. And I think, and it's sticking to my idea of approximations bring the most accuracy, yeah? And never forgetting the emphasis that can be made during these seasons in the calendar of what needs to be focused on, right? And applying that to this. I looked at that as well. I think primarily for this part, right? But for all of them. Again, because it does seem prevalent when I look at what's actually happened in these past 3 months of when we hit these middle marks of the overlap, the possible overlap of this tropical with the sidereal, and we hit that 5 to 6, 7 days, probably 5 or 6 days, right? Where there's concentrated energy for the first house, for the second house, for the third house in their time on the calendar, right? Not in your chart, but on the calendar. Then those 5, 6 days are going to be dedicated to not whatever houses you have in there necessarily. They will affect it, absolutely, but primarily the concerns of the house that's hitting in the calendar. And so don't aim not to ride that wave, right? Ride that wave. And so really, yeah, that's the water story. That brings us I'll do a video that goes page by page by page by page, all through all 3 water houses. And this is, again, lots. This is primarily, what, 6. This is my cousin Jean. And she believes in what she's doing, but here's the whole history of SIM. Oh, a thing that I didn't know. I was trying to look for the book that she'd given me as a child, the children's book that they were using, that they were handing out to the children to tell a story, true story, you know, why, you know, the witch doctor is bad, and the, you know, it's important to convert to Jesus, shall we say, but I won't lump Jesus in with Christianity easily, because he wasn't a Christian, and he wasn't white. But I couldn't find the book yet, the one that I have. I can't find it. I know I have it somewhere. I've been digging through my stuff, and I still haven't found the physical copy. So I was looking for it online. I did find most of SIM's, Sudan Interior Missions, their other publications. And one of the writers for them, this is astounding to me, but one of the writers for them, going years back, writing exactly the same kind of book as was handed to me, Tyra Banks' mother, Carolyn London. I've got it here somewhere. Okay, yeah, Carolyn London. Titles that are right here, and here, little tiny pictures, but and CEO of, what do I want to say? I can't even read. CEO, she was the CEO, or she still is the emeritus of the Tyra Banks Company, and co-founder of the T-Zone Foundation. You know, Tyra's T-Zone Foundation. But definitely in Masonic costuming there, in the black and white signaling. And, and for sure, if you're attached to SIM, and I went and looked up other publications as well, so I've got all those here. And then I went and looked up, I found one site, my mythhomephotius.com, the Yoruba. It's got a fairly sympathetic, I think, completely sympathetic explanation. Now, how accurate, I've been looking through a lot of sources. It's very protected information, and understandably so. Sorry, I'll put this back on camera, but I went looking for more information on Oshun and Yemaya, because there seems to be confusion for me in terms of Yemaya also had, no, Oshun has a river in Nigeria, and so that's freshwater. So I was thinking Oshun was, no, I did think Oshun was freshwater, and Yemaya was saltwater, but it's Yemaya that has a river in Nigeria, and that was freshwater. So I thought, well, okay, now I gotta dig more into this, and isn't it true enough? Because everybody's gonna have a version of this, and to get back to what is there one singular version? Or, well, we'll have to find out. But the Voodoo Hoodoo spell book, give them credit for giving me some substantial reading on that. But again, so I've gone through, like, the Queen's visit to Nigeria, right? Well, let's get started on that. But the Yoruba Bible, like, basically, I'm going back and I'm making sure that I get the information, the military stuff. It's just all, they admit to their own sins, right? So this is the difficult family work, and especially in light of, well, I wasn't waiting for mass graves to be dug up. I'm very used, you know, that is the life that I'm, you know, and they didn't even, the puppy that was suffering abandoned next door to me, they didn't even, I found out, I finally went into the text messages from the resident manager. They weren't even accepting my phone calls as an emergency. They decided that they would declassify or reduce it to a noise complaint. And I was like, no, I did not phone in it. So that's why it took 5 days to get that puppy rescued, because they didn't believe he was abandoned. You can't win for losing. Okay, so the other cases that are connecting me to Tracy, the work I did for Tracy, the law, like this is the rundown, this is the cover page for the document that I created for her case. This is some of the stuff that I found that is gonna, the headlines and everything to dig into for corruption. And then going back to the Conlons and In the Name of the Father, well, Jerry Conlon and the Guildford Four and the Birmingham Six that Tracy's connected to. I was looking up the lawyer Gareth Pierce, and she's no good because my old contact Christine Sands gives me the lowdown on Gareth Pierce being one of Assange's lawyers. And then this takes me back to everything that's wrong with Assange, because of course he's CIA, and these are all controlled situations. Yes, I've got so much on this stuff. Even Malcolm X, the last thing he said was, you know, the white supremacist Texas oil tycoon that pays for both the Nation of Islam and the KKK, right? And next thing you know, Malcolm's gone. Who introduced him at his last speech? Well, his second last speech, Alan Dershowitz. The same Alan Dershowitz that's Epstein's lawyer, yeah? That, you know, pretended to be going up against Epstein, but bullshit. And he's also an Assange lawyer, right? This takes me back to what got me online in the first place, which was the Al Jazeera situation out of Egypt. The Arab Spring blew up the year after I was in Egypt, that I took my son there on a spirit quest. And here we have fellow Canadian Egyptian Mohammed Fahmy. His brother followed me back at the time because I was supporting. But here we have Malcolm X right next to Hillary Clinton, right? So, So I've gone back, I've been digging a bit just to pull things together, but it's because dots connect. And so, really, and I found some artists that need to be, artists that are being exploited, they're being killed off, and their families are making a ton of money off them because of how much you can optimize information now online through analytics, yes, and create sister stories around their work and create new markets and everything like that. And it's just sickening. It's sickening. And it's something to be very aware of. More about my creative guides. And so really just D.H. Lawrence came through with a big, you know, big aha moment of truth for me that I'd been looking for. And you can only find by digging. Connections between Neve, goddess, possibly goddess Neve, looking so much in this tarot deck, totally like Anne Shirley. And I went to PEI because of Anne Shirley. And then, of course, we have the case, you know, the whole history of the Mi'kmaq being, you know, all things come together. And the person that wrote the article that I used about Neve, her name's Neve. And she has a website that's called the booksarebrainfood.org. And I go to her and I see that she's using exactly the same turquoise as I use for my drawing website. And she's got the Dutch house on her main page. And I completely tied Anne of Green Gables to my time in Amsterdam. So, you know, like all of these synchronicities that are just, at this point, if they weren't overwhelming, you know, JDS and his thing with the rainbow, DH put rainbows all over him, and Calico had his cat running all over his lap, and then he completely described my situation. Literally, this dark adventure you are in is about to turn into a romantic comedy, right? And then he said the name Baby Girl. And he's like, that's for somebody. It's not a term I use. I'm like, yeah, right over here. That's what he calls me. This one right here. So, and then here are the ad campaigns. Some of the ad campaigns I was running. I found another through the Neptune, Jupiter opposite Neptune celebrities. I found, who did I find? Fabre. Jean-Henri Fabre, entomologist, I believe. And so he's obviously, I'm going to try to connect with him. And then this is Krazi talking about Mars disappearing for 6 months. So Mars has disappeared for 6 months. And we'll see what effects that have. She does not like Mars, but I love Mars. And then, yeah. And so really back to this big picture prediction. And there was more. There was Kali showing up as Tara. deck that I came across. So really, that is, now where are we? This was May. Yeah. So everything becomes according to, how did I lose everything? This is what happens. So photo diary, photo diary, photo diary. Well, that's just, it's not, I don't know how it ended up messed up. I've got it out of whack there. Okay. So, but then that's it. That's it for, I'll do a little recap once I've got the whole thing done, but I'll probably put that in the video. I'll put a summary in the video. So I'll do a special video just going through this page by page by page by page. Yep. And then really what we're looking at, suddenly, look at that quiet looking month. We'll see how quiet it actually is. But we are heading straight for the embassy compound, because you don't just live in an embassy. And you don't always have to live in a compound around the embassy, but it's often enough a good plan. And you know, what's the lifespan now expected of an embassy? I think they're kind of like a dying breed. So might need to choose something. They'll resurface as something else, probably virtually. But so that's where we're headed for next week, for week 16. Yeah, I think we've gone on long enough for now. So I'll go get some readings done, and yeah, it feels like a huge shift from the water energy to the air energy, but I'm really happy to see that contrast, because that's what I wanted. That's what I was hoping for, and they're delivering on that. But it's very interesting to leave so much water energy. I hope the photo diaries are simpler. I really do, because they're taking up so much time, and they needed to be what they were for me. Hopefully not so heavy for you. But I really, there's something I achieved by laying them out that way that I don't achieve just by using words, either spoken or written. And again, it's separate from what I keep track of on these pages, because I keep track of a fair bit, but it doesn't even come through that way. So, what do we have coming up? Mercury direct, yes, right away. We got a new moon in Cancer coming up. So, manifestations, and we'll see what the kind of manifestations. And then we got to see when that sun actually enters Cancer. Venus will be hitting Leo. Mars will be hitting Leo. Not that we can see them. Full moon in Aquarius, which will be an interesting addition to being in Libra energy. Mercury hitting Cancer possibly. And then the Lionsgate portal opening up on the 26th, right around the 26th. So we'll see, then I'll be able to see exactly how much that affects my 8th house. How much it affects my 8th house. And so there we are. I will be back next week. Much love. And I hope that, yeah. I did go back though, and I did double check, now that I'm flipping through these pages, for my water story. I did go back and double check the details of the planets that are affected. I went back and checked the years and the events and the music. It'd be fun to do a playlist. Maybe I'll type up a playlist, yeah, for my 8th house, add it to that. And I still have to upload the meditation, but yeah, no, really, love it. I couldn't have hoped to have been handed a better creation than this. See you next week.